Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the Gospel of Matthew. We're finishing up chapter 17 with this curious incident in the life of Jesus that we read about only in Matthew. And of course, Matthew was there, and so was John of the four Gospel writers. But Matthew had been written decades before John ever wrote his Gospel. And John is really more concerned about letting us in on things we didn't know before by reading Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So it's not a surprise that we would have an episode like this, especially one that involved taxes, connected to the tax collector who became the apostle Matthew. When they had come to Capernaum, those who collected the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the 2 drachma tax?" And he said, "Yes." And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth collect customs or poll tax? From their sons or from strangers?" Upon his saying, "From strangers," Jesus said to him, "Consequently, the sons are exempt. But lest we give offense, go to the sea, throw in a hook, take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a stater." That's kind of a coin. Take that and give it to them for you and for me. Okay, so we don't have this anywhere else. He's not talking about taxes being paid to Rome. The Bible is clear. Jesus is clear. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. The Apostle Paul in Romans, chapter 13 tells us that it is our duty as Christians and citizens to pay our taxes. So I want us to understand clearly that that in no way is Jesus making this an issue about taxes per se. The tax is the temple tax. And the point Jesus is making is the temple is about God and about worshiping God and dedicating your life to God. And if I'm the Son of God, if I am who you say I am, who you know I am, why would you think I would pay the temple tax? It's not appropriate for me to pay the temple tax. In fact, the temple tax is not something that is mentioned in the Old Testament anyway, and Jesus has very strong feelings about the commerce that goes on in and around the temple precincts. And so we understand why Jesus would resist trying to pay this temple tax. But it is not a matter of doctrine. It's not a matter of theology. Therefore, he says, okay, you made this promise. We're going to keep this promise. We're not going to give them offense. And so he fulfills this promise through a miracle. The temple tax would have been, it says 2 drachmas here, 2 coins, two days' wage, in other words, one for each of them. There's the temple tax, 2 days' wage per person. The stater coin would be equivalent to 4 or 5 of these, and so it's going to cover for both Peter and for Jesus. I think that's interesting that he covers them both. And I'm sure Peter never forgot that lesson. So it says something about the person of Jesus, about how careful he was to not betray in any way, not symbolically, not actually, his person as God's Son. But we also see Jesus weighing the 2 actions, not paying the tax or paying the tax, neither of which is really ideal now that Peter's done what he's done, and choosing between the 2, the one that will give the least offense. And so he does that. That in itself is a lesson, to see Jesus in action weighing 2 options and choosing one. 2 options that neither of which are good, the options that he would pick, but he chooses between them and has to and does, and makes the choice that will give least offense. That's important as well. Another example that we have from Peter of thinking before you speak, which he does not in this episode. Okay, I've taken up a little more than 5 good minutes of your time. Thank you so much. We'll introduce the book of Matthew chapter 18 next time. Thank you so much for joining me.